Okay, morning. Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today we are up to Daf Tei Ches Amid Aleph. So the Gemara talks of we're going on the Mishnah where the Mishnah says that if you wound an Evet Kanani, a non-Jewish slave who was converted and is working for a Yid, that you have to pay full compensation. But if they cause harm to somebody else, at the moment they have no money, have no assets, and they can't pay. So Pekiyos and Ra. Eventually, if he's liberated or set free, then he has to pay. And Rabbi Yehuda said there's no shame when it comes to an Eved. So you want to Eved Kanani. I guess just in logic before bringing up Sukkim is the very fact that there's an Eved is already pretty shameful. So you want to my time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the possible logic of Rabbi Yehuda? What's his basis? On Makro, the pasuk says, "Ki yinotzu anoshim yachda." The two people quarrel. Ish v'achiv, a man and their brother. And then we have this woman coming along and grabbing, to defend her husband. She grabs a hold of the man's embarrassing parts. So we see that it's only if a man and his brother struggles. And a slave, and a slave does not have any brotherhood because a slave is like a slave has no family whatsoever. And therefore, and he has no brotherhood with a Yid because they're not part of the Jewish community. As a result, because what do you call it? The laws of shame don't apply. No, the Rabbanu say it does apply. But they say, the fact is that an Eved Kanani has all the laws of a woman that he's chayiv, and all the mitzvahs that a woman is chayiv. We learn out Gzeir Shaveh, law, and therefore we know that they're chayiv mitzvahs, so they can be called achiv. The bottom line is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, an Eved Kanani cannot be called achiv. So you must ask a number of questions based on this notion of achiv. Because he cannot be called a brother, therefore there's no laws of shame. What about some other laws? If two witnesses come along and make up some concoction story about an Eved, turned out to be that they lied. For example, they said that he murdered somebody, so he deserves to be killed, and these Eidim were found liars, they were somewhere else at the time. We punish the Eidim exactly what they wanted to do to the Eved. So we see that that we do apply the laws of Eidim Zayn. And yet, what does it say about Eidim Zayn? It says you don't do it to your brother. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, by an Eved, there's no laws of Eidim Zayn because the Eved is not considered your brother. Amar Rav, Amar Rav Sheshes. So it says Rav, the name of Sheshes. Amar Kra. When it comes to Eidim Zayn, the Torah makes a general statement. It's a despicable act. You have to get rid of this kind of evil because it said Mekebech amongst you. I don't care. Weed it out. I don't care what the story is. Then since they tried to harm an innocent Eved, we punish the Eidim. So that's therefore expansive, and it includes an Eved, even though they might not technically be considered Achiv. Okay, let me answer the Rabbanon. According to Rabbanon, who hold that an Eved is considered Achiv, why can't Eved be a king? And there's the whole discussion regarding, Hurdas and his family, and how can they be a king? Well, Yanai, how can it be a king? And according to Rabbanon, they say an Eved is an Achiv, and it says in the Torah that a king should be appointed Mekerav Achicha, and any position of authority. Why can't an Eved be included? Amri L'Taimei, back. Let me ask you a question. Forget what we said. What about a Tishla Ger? A Ger, everybody, a Ger is definitely considered Achiv, can marry any Yid. Okay, except a Ger can marry a Kohen, but apart from that, they can marry any Yid, they're part of the Kol. So how come a Ger can't be a Melech? They leave it Hako. And how come a Ger can't be a Melech? The reason is on my cross, as opposed to that means from the depths, from the inner recesses of your brothers, I guess from somebody who is like born from the best amongst your brothers. What's the best? If the mother, according to Rashi, the mother has to be Yid. According to Traces, the mother and the father have to be Yid. According to this, if Rabbanon consider an Eved an Achiv, why can't an Eved be kosher later? It says in Pasuk, when he ate sheker, this aide who lied, her ate sheker on Bachila. This lay ate, testified falsely about their brothers. They testified about their brothers. So he's so what if you mean what? It says Achiv, and according to Rabbanon, an Eved is Achiv, so Eved should be kosher latest. Eved should be kosher latest. Says the Gemara, Amarula, ages Lamotzam. You can't say an Eved should be kosher latest, and why not? Asya ages Kabochem Mish. We learn that from an Isha. And how do you know talking ever can be? Gemara is making a declaration that ever can be. Why not? Because it says in the pasuk by Aiden Zaymin, the two men should stand up. So we darshan that what? First of all, anoshim men and not women. That's how you know women cannot be an aid. It's exeris akasav. For omlushna anoshim, the men should stand up. So we learn men, but women cannot be aides. And once we've established that women cannot be aides, and avodim we learn from women, so therefore avodim cannot be aides as well. And the most question is, why not? It should be kosher aides. And even though, what's the most question? We just said we learned from law. So there's two ways of understanding Lola. One way is an Eved is chayiv and everything, and Lola comes to reduce. The other way of learning is an Eved is really, since it's a forcible gatus, it's not really a proper conversion, should be potter, exempt from all mitzvahs. We learn Lola to make him chayiv. So you more understand that that's what it is. We learn from Lola to make him chayiv. And therefore, that is only chayiv and mitzvahs that a woman is chayiv. And now the question is now, why isn't he able to have another lima, a special thing that is called achiv? That anybody's achiv should be suitable to be an aid. Why can't an ever be an aid as well? Says the Gemara. So the Gemara says Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah is very simple. Ma isha isha that is suitable to come into the general congregation. By anybody. Yepsul ladies, ever change the role of call. Ever has a weakness, a word that it cannot. He's not part of the call. Surely, ain't a din postulated. Surely, it's postulated. Now, Rashi says an interesting thing here. Just like an isha cannot be an aid, because it says amlushna anoshim veloy isha. So the same thing from that same place we learn that a child. How do we know that a child cannot be an aid? Because it says amdu anoshim veloy cotton. And then Rashi throws in another reason, interesting reason, which Rabbi Kiva Egeri has a long issue with. And Rashi says that because Eidos have to be able to be found liars, and since by a child, the Eidim cannot be found liars, because even if they are, the child would not have been punished. So the Eidim, we cannot punish the Eidim as they wanted to do. There's no kasha zamam. Therefore, we know that the Eidim, there's no checks and balances, there's no Eidos. So that's why cotton can never be Eidos, because cotton is always Eidashi ata yochel hazima. And Reb Kibbutz has this question, so why the Gemara in other places when we discuss a cotton in Bava Basra doesn't mention the second reason of Rashi, only mentions the first reason of Rashi. And then Tesis, Rabbi Kibbutz says, you think when it comes to money matters, we rule that today we no longer ask questions. We don't really interrogate the witness on money matters. Otherwise, people stop lending money. It's too difficult, and the agents could be caught out. They're not smart enough. They might say the wrong thing. So once we remove the interrogation, there's no longer hazama. And so there's no longer hazama when it comes to money matters. Then a child should be able to be a valid witness. That's why we need the other reason that are amdu hanoshim, only adults and not minors. Anyway, says the Gemara, Malisha, what are you talking about? No, why a woman cannot be an aegis. Perhaps she can enter a milah, missing out on the mitzvah of milah, which is such an important mitzvah. Tame Evet, milah says an Evet has advantage better to the male, that he has a mitzvah of milah because part of the conversion process. So even though it's forcible, so maybe it could be an aid. So it says cotton yechiach. Now, when we say over here that a woman has no mitzvah milah, it's not a fair statement to make. It's not that they have no mitzvah; they just don't have the body to have a bris milah. So some want to say she has no mitzvah to circumcise anybody else. In fact, we have a machlekes of a woman, if she does mal somebody is valid, and maybe this Gemara follows the opinion that it's not valid. So the whole idea of milah, forget about it herself. Even on other men, she has no mitzvah. Okay, so Gemara says you want to say an Eved is better off, so maybe it should be valid eight because it's achiv kotnichich. What about a minor? A minor she yeshta ben milah has the milah uposel edis, and yet it is posel edis. And the way the Gemara says, the way Rashi explains, it sounds like that a child himself has the mitzvah is on the father because the child can't, but the child, because the child is the object of the mitzvah, it's as if the child is a party to the mitzvah. So the child has a shaykhis to the mitzvah, and yet is not qualified to be an aid. So an eved, even though they have the full mitzvah, they're not qualified to be an aid. So we're going to say, no, we're saying malakot mitzvahs. A cotton has no mitzvahs apart from that. Mitzvahs, so many mitzvahs, like a woman. Isha techia. But then we say, well, look, a woman has all these same mitzvahs, and yet they're not valid for ages. She yesh them in mitzvahs of psul ages, qualified for ages. The chazadim go back and forth. Each one has their own thing. What's in common? She can ain't b'chol mitzvahs. say a woman, and say a minor. They don't have all the mitzvahs. Upsul lahayid, and they're disqualified from giving testimony. That's a common denominator. Afani obvious evet. So too an evet, even though it says achiv she'ein b'chol mitzvahs, since it's not suitable to do all the mitzvahs, upasul lahayid, disqualified from this. Says the Gemara, it's still not good enough. And you know what I can say? What they both have in common: the woman and the minor, shekein, and adults. She's an adult, and the pasuk is v'amlushne nashim, so they are nashim, they're adults, and his chayimos mitzvahs. Why can't an eved be? And he's an achiv according to the rabbanon, so why can't he be an aid? Jewish. A gazlan is an adult. A gazlan can do all the mitzvahs, suitable to all the mitzvahs. In fact, it only does will see this one aveda of being a gazlan, and is suitable to be a member of the kol. Yet it's disqualified for being aedis. So same thing over here. Mal, and since he doesn't do one or two mitzvahs, the mitzvah do with gzela, and he's disqualified for being an aedis, the same thing for Evid, since he's not chayim and all the mitzvahs, disqualified for being aedis. Says Gemara, Malik Gazlan shekei ma'aseh garmeloi. What do you mean? A Gazlan is his own fault. He does have the mitzvah. He just decided not to do the mitzvah. So therefore, and he did it as an aveda. So he brought it upon himself that he's disqualified for being an aid. It's not his fault, his situation. So therefore, it's not something personally that you can blame him for. So maybe he could be an aid. We take gazlan and we take a woman or a minor, and between the two of them, we say, look, fact is, if you don't do all the mitzvahs, you're not qualified to be an aid. So the same thing over here. Even though the gazlan does it because it's his own choice, he made a bad choice, and by a woman because she doesn't have those mitzvahs, it doesn't matter. The fact is, if you're not doing all the mitzvahs, you are apostle aidis. So from here, when it says in Pasuk, Al Tosha's Russia aid, you see from here that if somebody's over and Aveir in the Torah, not only Zela, you would say that maybe there's, as we'll see in the Gemara Sanhedrin, whether they're qualified or disqualified for being an aid. Mar Bereya de Ravina, Mar, the son of Ravina, he has a whole different way of learning. Amakra, the interesting way of learning. The Pasuk says, Lo yumsu oves abonim. So generally speaking, we learn from here that relatives cannot testify on behalf or against relatives. So it says a pasuk, Lo yumsu oves, a parent should not die abonim on the testimony of their children. And that's what the pasuk reads. So Lo yumsu oves abonim, and then the pasuk continues, Ubonim lo yumsu aloves. And children should not die in a testimony. If you read it normally, the children should not die in a testimony of their father, which obviously is redundant. Once you know that a child cannot testify, what do you call it? A child cannot testify against a father, then obviously a father cannot testify against a child. So that's redundant. Plus, the wording, it says, La yumsu ovis al bonim, that a father should not die in testimony of a child. It should have said of their children. The whole idea is to teach about relatives, and it should have said al b'neihem, on their children. They should not die based on the testimony of their children. Why does it say al-banim? So therefore, Mar, as Rabbi says, there's another whole area that we learn from, another whole area of Allah we learn from here. That is an Eved. An Eved is unique. Somebody who converts, a ger, he loses his ties with his whole family because he's now like a new person. So technically he's allowed to marry his sister, his mother, right? So he has no parents, technically, but he has children. He's now a full-fledged Yid, and married, the children are his. An Eved who goes through a forcible conversion has no parents, but nor does he have children. Eved ein lechayis. All the children that he bears belong to his master. They haven't, so he has no yichas whatsoever, no chayis, not up, not lamaila, no parents, not lamata, no children. Says Mar, the son of Lavina. You know why I'm going to dash from the pasuk? You want to know why an Eved is qualified for being an aid? I'll tell you why. The pasuk talks about testimony. The testimony of others should not take place from bonim. What does that mean? La yumsu al pi others she'ein lehem chayis bonim. That witnesses who have others who cannot have children. And who is that? Which witness can have children? It's an Eved, because the children do not follow them. It's not their yichus, and that's how we know an Eved cannot be an aid. Because these are like, if we take it literally, what that relatives cannot testify. Then the yumsu always abanim be'edus banim. We're talking about what relatives can't testify. Lift the rachman yumsu always abanehem on their children. My boni. What do you mean? Children stam. Shmamino comes to teach you the loyimsu alpi others she'ein lehem chayis. That those people who should be parents, but they have no children because they're an Eved, they cannot be Edim. That's what you do in the first part of the pasuk. Loyimsu others al bonim. Says the Gemara Elamata. If that's how you can be so pedantic, let's see the next part of the pasuk. It says a bonim loyimsu al others. And what do you mean bonim loyimsu al others? What does that come to add? I'll tell you, it would sound like it comes to add that even if you could have children, but if you can't have parents, those bunim that have no parents, now which children have no parents? A ger. A ger, a convert has no parents because gershin is guys like a new person. The way you dashin, you don't say Abbas say him their parents, which would mean relatives, it means others. Bonim that those people who are children who don't have parents should not be able to say testify, and the ger shouldn't be able to testify. And we know, of course, the ger can testify. And again, how can I postulatus? According to you, then a ger should be disqualified for being edis. Amri says, so what are you comparing the two? Ger, again, he didn't lechayis l'mayla. Ger has no parents. Of lamata yesh lechayis, but he has children. Lafuki ever. The problem with an evid is he has no. It's not vertical. All his relationships are horizontal. The ain't lechayis l'mayla lamata. He has no parents because he went through a conversion. Nor does he have children because everything that all his children that he bears belong to his master. Because and I'll prove it to you. Because these are that a gate puzzle. If you want to say the puzzle, trying to tell you that a gate is also puzzle, then lichtay b'rachmana. Then let try to say la yumsu others al b'neihem. Let the pasuk then start off saying, no, if we can establish that a ger cannot be an aid, then surely an eved. An eved is much worse than a ger. A ger has a problem that a ger has no parents, but he has children. An eved has no parents, nor does he have children. So we don't have to tell me about an eved. Once I know about a ger, that's enough. So if so, let's go back to the pasuk. The Taylor should say the first part of the pasuk then should just talk about relatives. So the Taylor should say la yumsu others al b'neihem. B'neihem, your children cannot be a relative for to testify for you or against you. The children cannot be aiders. And then we'll say, just tell us that that children who have no parents cannot be aided. That's a ger. And I'll know if a ger cannot be an aid, surely an eved cannot be a ger. An eved is worse than a ger. Not only eved has no parents, has no children. The Shammai ben Eid today, I learned from them two things. First of all, I would know that one, that children cannot die in a relative. And I would also know that what that children who have no parents, others cannot be Eidim. And then you'll ask me, what about an Evid? The Evid nafka kalchema. I say pure logic. Again has no parents. Yet he has a family and he has children, and we're disqualifying for being an aid. So Evid, what about a slave? Has no parents, nor does he have children. Surely cannot be a aid. So it must be that a gay definitely qualifies to be an aid. If it says la yumsu aves al bonim, the mashma la yumsu al pi aves ein lechayis bonim, when it says that you cannot have parents who don't have no children, that's talking about an evet. The first part of the pasuk is talking about an evet. Shmamana evet she'ein lechayis, only an evet who has no parents. She'ein le'lamayla has no parents because he went through conversion. Le'lamata has no children because it belongs to the master. Who the apostle le'edus is disqualified, but a gay who has children, given this lechayis lamata kosher le'edus. I said so. So the pasuk is only talking about an Evan, and we've established that in the first part of the pasuk where it says that the parents who have no children. So why then in the end of the pasuk it says Bonim? We should have just said we don't need any more to know children who have no parents. That's irrelevant because if an Evan already we know an Evid doesn't have children or parents. What do you have to stress that for? So therefore, the second half pasuk could have read normally that children should not die in the testimony. Allah is saying their parents. The mashmat seems it seems that Ted is trying to add children that have no parents, but what for? If a gay is kosher ladies, who we're trying to exclude with this one? Says, well, you're right. We're not trying to exclude anybody. But I did the cost of the yumsa of abundant because the first half of the passage we're talking about generic parents are having no children. Cost of not me abundant of it. If we're talking about children have no parents, even just the wording, the syntax, we wanted to follow the same flow. But you're right, we're not learning anything from it because a ger definitely could be 100% a kosher witness. Chayiv in all the mitzvahs, part of the Jewish congregation. It's only an eved because the eved has no parents, no children, cannot be an eved. Okay, then you said chedesh shaita v'katan or chedesh shaita v'katan. Because the bad news, if they harm somebody, they're potted. If you harm them, you have to pay full price. Gemara said this: Imei de Rav Shmuel bar Abba, the mother of Rav Shmuel, the son of Abba, Mehagronya, have a nesiva leila Rav Abba. So what happened was she was married to Rav Abba from Hagronya, had a son called Rav Shmuel. Then her husband died, and she married another person who carried the same name, Rab Abba. And she wanted that her wealth should not end up with her husband, but should end up with her son. Now, a woman, when she goes into marriage, she receives a ksuba from her husband, and she has two kinds of properties. She has nichsei tzem barzel and nichsei maloi. Nichsei tzem barzel are ironclad, which means it's something she incorporates in the ksuba. And she says, look, these properties belong to me, they're family heirlooms. I want them, or family property, the states. I want them to go into the ksuba, which means that the husband has to give it back to her when he pays her out the ksuba, he has to give it back. If he predeceases her, he has to pay her out. Make a fixed price. And it doesn't matter whether it went up in value or down in value. That's the price. That's called nichse tzembazel. It's ironclad, and that's incorporated in the ksuba. Then you have other properties called nichse maleg, plucked nechasim. These are assets that she brings into the marriage. It's not part of the ksuba. The husband works on it and makes sure that it's productive, so he's entitled to all the dividends. And when they divorce, or if he predeceases her, she gets it back, and whatever the values at the time. If she predeceases him, it goes to the husband. She wanted that estate should go to the son. So therefore, she decided, you know what, she'll gift the son. As long as she's married to Rababa, it'll be Nichsim Aloy. He has the payers. He has the payers of dividends. But the goof, the body belongs to her. So she gave it to her son and said, look, I'm giving you the property itself, but the dividends still belong to my husband. And if he predeceases us, and the property then should go to you. So the Gemara. She wrote it all over. She handed it over to her son. Boss the shchiva after she dies. It should go to the son. And now what happened after she died? Also, Rav Shmuel ben Abba Kamei did Rabbi ben Abba. So Shmuel ben Abba went before Rabbi ben Abba. A lot of Abbas in those days. Whether they were related or not so clear. Ukmei ben Nechasef. Shmuel Rabbi ben Abba said, well, she gave it to him while she was alive. It was his property, even though the husband is entitled to the dividend. But now that she's gone, he takes over. Also, Rab Abba, so Rab Abba, the husband, he went and he said over the milsik. He went to another rabbi, Rabbi Isha, see what he rules. Also, Rabbi Isha went. Amra Kamed Yehuda went to Rabbi Yehuda and asked him what he rules. Amar Leis, Rabbi Yehuda said, Hachi Amar Shmuel. My teacher Shmuel said. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda learned by Rabbi, and then afterwards he went to Shmuel. My teacher Shmuel said, Ha'isha, a woman. What happened if a woman unsells her estate, the nichsim malayg, the plucked properties, which means that she did not incorporate in the ksuba, she brought it in, the husband gets a dividend. So the husband has the paytis, she has the goof. If she sold it while the husband was alive, she sold it. But right now, the person who bought it cannot get his hands on it because the husband is entitled to all the dividends. The mesa baal, eventually the husband dies. Umesa Kama. And she died. So who ends up with the property now? The purchaser who bought it while she was alive, or the husband? The husband ends up with the property. So what do you see from here? Says Shmuel, and Rabbi Yehuda saying it, that the husband, even though that the wife sold the property while she was alive, if she dies, the husband is the one who has first rights to the property. So even though she gave it to her son, since the husband is entitled to Yashner, Rav Abba takes the property, not Shmuel. Amru Kamei Rabbi Abba. They went back to Rabbi Abba and told him that Rabbi Yehuda passed differently. Amalhu, he said, I don't know what he's talking about. I know I'm a Ferisha Mishnah, and we learned, and therefore I'm right that the gift that the mother gave to the son does belong to the son, and I'll prove it from here. Now we learn, if somebody, a father, writes that his estate should go to his son, he says that after I die, I want the property to go to you, so I'm giving it to you right now. The body of the property, the goof, the essence of the property is yours. The dividends, have life tendency. So I'm going to continue on the property, but the body itself of the property belongs to you. Okay. Haben Einu Yochalim, the son cannot sell the property because he doesn't have the rights to the dividends, to the payers. Because the father has the rights. But the father can no longer sell the property because the property itself belongs to the son. Let's say the father did sell the property. The father can only sell his rights. What are his rights? As long as he's alive, he has a dividend. So therefore, he can sell that. It's sold only until he dies. Because the dividend that he entitled to goes to goes to that buyer. But the moment the father dies, the son yashins, the property goes to the son because he already had the goof of the property as well. Now, what about Mochar Ben? The son sold it. Now, right now, he doesn't have the dividends, but he sold it. The buyer has no rights to it until the father dies. When the father dies, the father only had the dividends. As soon as the father dies, the property gets transferred to this purchaser because the property itself belonged to the son, and now the dividends pass on to the son as well. Because the father gave it over to the son. Kimayis of Mia, but the father died. Isa gets the property. It doesn't qualify here when the son died. It sounds from here. Even if the son died in the lifetime of the father, we don't say, oh, well, the father takes the property back, and therefore now the property completely belongs to the father, and the lekeach, the buyer, has no right to it. We say that the body of the land was transferred to the lekeach, and it remains there. And once soon the father dies, the dividends also go to the lekeach. The sale of the son was a valid sale. The loss of the ben, even though the son never really got a hold of the property, because the son predeceased his father, he only had in a nominal terms, he had in writing. It was more symbolic than anything else. Nevertheless, no, we say something was transferred to the son, the property itself, even though the dividends were the father. So we separate the paytas and the goof. We say that the goof can be transferred even though the paytas belong to somebody else, because kinyan paytas lavka kinyan aguf. Even though the father has the dividends, he has no rights or ownership in the property itself. So the son, when he sold the property, it was a valid sale, because we hold kinyan paytas dividends does not mean to have any chelik or any portion of the property itself. We follow Shimon Lakish, who says, we don't care if the son died before the father. Never became the sons, but it doesn't matter. And the father had the dividends, because we sever the time between the dividends and the property itself. So the son was the owner of the property, he sold that. So therefore that sale remains. And when the father dies, the dividends go to that as well. We don't care if the father died first. Then for sure it's not a problem. Then the son actually took ownership. The son took ownership. Surely he said about sale. What's this Reish Lakish? What are you talking about? Even we learned the son, let's say, sold the property that in the lifetime of his father. The mace haben, and the son died, by the father's life. Rabbi Yochanan says, like Rabbi Yochanan says that the father had the dividends, kinyan paid as kinyan goof. So as long as the father's life tendency is not just he has the right to use it, there's ownership there. The father has ownership. Whoever has a dividend, the right to use it is the owner, because that's what ownership is. Therefore, the son only has a nominal right to the thing. He doesn't have really anything. So there's nothing that he was able to sell. The father's the one, and if the son died first, then it never left the father's estate, and the son had nothing to sell. That's Rabbi Yochanan. The Shlaki says no, that the ownership is a lot more than just the use of it, dividends, and therefore the father had the dividend but no ownership. The son had the ownership, and his sale is a valid sale. And even though he predeceased the father, so what? Once he sold it, he sold it. And the Shlaki says Kana lekech. Rabbi Yochanan lekech Amlach. He'll tell you kicked on him and says, when does the Mishnah say Machar ben like Kana lekech? When does the Mishnah say that the son sold, that the lekech is not become the owner until the father dies? But after the father died, Easter lekeach is talking about the loy meis haben b'chayav. The son did not predecease his father, so after the father died, the ownership now was transferred to the son, and therefore the sale retrospectively was a valid sale. Also, they ben avo mes haben b'chayav. But if the son predeceased the father, the la'asila date ben. If the son predeceases the father, which means, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the father who had the dividends also has the ownership, because that's what ownership is, the right to use it. So if the son predeceases the father, the son never really had anything to sell, so therefore it remains with the father. The never came into his ownership. When the father died, the lekech has nothing. There was nothing that was transferred. Alma Kasavar. So we see clearly Rabbi Yochanan holds kinyan paytas, kinyan gutami. Whoever has the use of it, the dividends, is the one who actually owns it. Because that's what ownership is. What's ownership? Ownership is use of it, exclusive use. The chizov, a lot of days of us, when the child sold, what did he sell? However, the Shlakish holds no, that ownership is far more than just the use of it. Ownership is the thing itself, and therefore the father can have the use of it, but the son had the ownership, and he made a valid sale. Kana lekech it buys it. Why? Kitani mastis. When the Mishnah said Machar haben, the son sold it. Ein lekech achi yamasav. The sale does not really take place until the father dies. Kimayis of mias, when the father dies, is lekech does transfer lekech. Lo yishno lo yimesa mechayav. That's the data ben. I don't care if the son did not die mechayav. Lo yishno mesa mechayav, or the son did die. The lo also data ben. Kana lekech is kind. I'll motor him here that Rabbi Shlakish holds. Kinyan paid his lavke kinyan aguvdami. The father only had the use of it. The son owned the ownership, and therefore he was able to sell it. The chekazavin, the day kazavin. So now Rabbi Yirmiyah concludes. We hashed today. Bein Rabbi Yirmiyah barabba, bein Rabbi even Rabbi Yehuda. Since there are three exceptions with the halachas like Reish Lakish. One of them is this one right here. Kinyan. Kinyan Pedis ki Kinyan Guf. The halacha is like Reish Lakish that Kinyan Pedis is not ki Kinyan Haguf. That dividends is mine, you have ownership. So the son sold as a valid sale. So the same with the mother. The mother owned the nichse maloig. The father only had the right of dividends. So if the mother decided to gift it to her son, which is a stepson to Rababa, gave it to her son, it's a valid transfer because she still had the ownership, and the father only had the use of dividends. Is since we all rule like Rav Shimon Lakish, Svida will be hold like that. And he goes further. If you're going to argue with me and you're going to say no, Kinyan paid us Kinyan guftam. If you're going to argue with me and say that what that dividends means you own the property itself, so then kimayis of if the father died, umayis haben b'chayav, and if the son died, predeceased the father, that means the son never had any ownership. Why would it be a transfer? And it seems the mission makes absolutely no difference. When the son died, the sale is a valid sale. Even when the son never had a chance of the dividends, all he had was ownership. Seems clear from here that whoever had the dividends was never an owner. So when the son, even though the father was alive and using the property, and the father transferred the son the property itself, it belonged to the son, and the son sale was a valid sale. So why otherwise? Why would it transfer to lekech? Because of an high love today, because of the son sold something that belonged to him. And Lashman does not prove Kinyan Paydas lav ki Kinyan aguvdam. It proves that Kinyan Paydas is that dividends does give you ownership, and therefore the husband has only dividends, no ownership, and the mother's transfer, the son's a valid transfer. Taish already explains in a nutshell, and he asks the same question in a few places in Gittin as well, that since we paskin like Reish Lakish, that Kinyan Pedis is Lavki Kinyan Aguf, but we also paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, or we paskin Ein Breira, which means when you divide an estate, you don't know that what you ended up with really is yours, what someone else ended up with is yours. So technically, every 50 years, every year, you have to sort of in writing, redistribute, even though you just leave things the way they are, like redistributing, which means that nobody ever owned property because all you had was the use of it, right? As if we agreed, okay, you continue using the property. I don't know if it's yours or not, but you continue using it. And how can you ever give Bikurim? Because in order to say Bikurim, you have to say that the land that you gave me. But how do you know this is your property? So the only ways that somebody can be chayiv Bikurim is chad b'chad ad Yeshua. If you're a single son from a single son from a single child, there's not a son of daughter, but a single child, that's the only way, which is ridiculous. So Taisus here answers that the first time they were here, since Yeshua distributed the land, and everybody then gave Bikurim, because the mitzvah Bikurim. So the argument of Bechon Shlokish actually is: do we say that was only a one-off thing, and that's or the Shlokish would say no. Once we came to distribution of land, even though in other areas may be different, but when it comes to this, and even though you hold Ein Breira, but when it comes to distribution of land, once we put into place that land belongs to you, then that law remains forevermore. And when your children divide an estate, we halachically, even though we say Ein Breira, we're going to say this is what do you call it? A Yerusha inheritance is different. Whatever you ended up with, that is yours. Hey, the Gemara continues. So that's the proof. That's why I paskin. He said I ruled that Shmuel gets to keep the property. Amalei. So they went back and forth. They went back to Rabbi Yehuda and said, "Look, Rabbi Yehuda maintains that you're wrong." Amalu, so he said a very cryptic statement. He said, this case is different. Your case is different. What's going on? My timer. Why is it different? No explanation. So Amar Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef came along and he said, I can understand as follows. He said, you know why it's different? Because we're talking about a father wrote to his son. His son is the heir. And because the son is the heir, the son over here, the sale is a valid sale, even though he predeceased his father. Because he's a Yerush, he already had. And you think this. So what was the point? The son anyway would inherit his father. So why bother giving it to him while he's alive when the father's still going to continue using it? So what was the point? When he'll die, that's when he'll get it. He'll anyway get it because he's an heir. In other words, he wanted to go one step above. You know what he wanted? He, in this case, specifically wanted that the land should be transferred to the son. Otherwise, why would he write it to the son? Anyway, he'd get it after he died because he's the Yerush, he's the heir. But a normal case, since the whoever has the dividends also has has ownership, or part ownership, or full ownership, and therefore the sale wouldn't have been a sale. So the mother, when she gave it to the son, nothing happened. In the case of the Mishnah we're talking about, there the father wrote it over to the son because what's the point? He's an heir anyway, unless he wants to actually, in this particular case, transfer the property itself, and that's why the sale is a valid sale. So basically, this the Mishnah would have said the other way around. The case of the son writes and transfers the thing to his father. So then we would say, if we would have said that, then you would have a valid point. And yet the sale, if the father would have sold, it would have been a good sale. You would tell me, see, the son only retained the dividends, no ownership for the sons. The father sells a valid sale. Then we can then rule from there. The kinyan paid what the son retained for himself was merely the dividends, and therefore he's no longer the owner, and the father sells a valid sale. But now, what's the case in the mission? The father writes it over to the son. Anyway, the son is an heir. Since he's an heir, why did he write it? Must be to add another layer. He said, look, in this case, I'm making an exception. I want you to have the property itself. And that's why the son sells a valid sale. But that's a unique case. Of course, Abai is not going to let Rabbi Yosef get away with it. Abai, what are you talking about? Just like a father who bequeaths to his son, a son can bequeath to his father. Abai, Otu bro yored abba, abba la yored bro, but the father and the Yash and the son. No, but what? He's talking about here, the son had children of his own. Why did he write it over to his father? Because he didn't like his children, whatever the reason is, he didn't want his children to inherit his property. So therefore he handed it over to his father. So the same thing, the father, in the case of the father and son, what are you going to ask me? Why did he give it to his son? He's going to inherit it. No, he isn't. He had 6 brothers. They all would have inherited equally. The father, therefore, didn't want the other brothers to have the property. So he gave it to the son. Not because he was going to inherit it away. He only would have inherited 1/6. And now he's giving the whole thing. It's like any other sale, no different. And yet we say that the son gave it over to the thing. It's a valid sale. So you want to prove from here the fact that the son's sale is a valid sale, even though he predeceased his father. I mean, the father, once he gave it up, he only had dividends. The dividends is not ownership. So then L'chayr Rabim is a good psak. The mother gave it to the son. The husband only has dividends, so the mother still owns the property, and she gave that to the son. So L'chayr Rabim is right. He only wants his other children to get it. So he only doesn't want the brothers to have it. But I'll tell you what Rabbi Yehuda meant. You know what he means? He said you cannot bring any proof from our Mishnah that whoever has the dividends does not really own it, and that's why the son says, no, here's different. Our husband, Bishum Takonas Usha, he says, you're right. In the case of the Mishnah, the son owns it now and he can transfer it, but not in the case of the mother, and because the mother is talking about a husband, and a husband is stronger than any other relationship. Bishop Takonas Usha made established a special institution in Usha. The Amar Rabbi Yosef Usha is in a special institution. If a wife sells her properties while her husband's alive, the Mesa, and then she died, generally speaking, we say that maybe that it was not that the sale was a valid sale. But the husband is different. You know why? Who give extra strength to the husband, want to make sure the relationship is valid, and there shouldn't be any, suspicion that the husband will say, well, I'm working so hard for my wife, and she can tomorrow walk away and sell it. So therefore, we make special powers to the husband that he is considered the first purchaser. Generally speaking, let's say in the case of father and son, the son cannot sell it because he owns the property. Over here, even though the wife owns the property and the husband only has dividends, we gave special koyach as the husband's dividends as if he owns it. And if she unsold it, he can take it back. Same thing, therefore, when she gave it to the son, he could take it away from the son. He could take it back for the son.